This is the skid version of the all-in-one machine. These are going out tomorrow. We've had some video issues, but we'll try this again and see if we can get a good overview of this thing to show you the operation of this particular unit. This particular unit has two remotes. This one controls the engine, and then the bottom two buttons control the actual mixer on here. This unit also has a remote wiring harness that goes out to the outside of the truck or skid for better visibility. We've got the clear manifold on this, which is what we much prefer to use in these setups. That way we can watch our air leaks. This one also has a remote bypass feature. The secondary remote controls the valve right there on the side of the unloader, where you can bypass either back to the tank or internally for when you're using chemical. Super simple setup when it comes to a lot of that. Makes it where you can do many different applications. So we're going to run through this one start to finish. We're going to start and stop this thing a couple times. We are going to make a little noise. So basically, with our engine controls, when you turn on, everything goes live on the motor, and you do have to have the trigger pulled to crank it. So in this case, the number 2 on this remote is what turns the engine on. The number 1, the red button, is what turns it off. The number 3 is what actually starts it. So we're going to crank it back up again. We're going to run through just the basic operation of how everything goes on this. So once again, number 2, and I'm going to step away from this to try to get a little bit of where you can hear me as this is going on. So that covers basically the switch back and forth, and I apologize, we're just going to have to cut it on and off because of the audio here. We're not smart enough to do voiceovers and stuff like that yet. But when this thing is running like that, you can run it full pressure with the tip that we have now. You can run a surface cleaner, you can run a ball valve, you can run all your standard accessories. Then in just a second, I'm going to grab a J-rod, pop a J-rod in it, and show you, how the low pressure side of this works as well. Now, we do recommend with these, you need 2 full 1-inch water supply lines. Those are going to be hooked up right here on the water valve, and then also right here on the 3-way valve. So these are the only 2 connections that will need to be made on site once the unit is delivered. That does need to be 2 very good supply lines coming from, whatever your water tank is. Nothing smaller than 1 inch, anything like that. Everything else, your bleach is plumbed to the 100-gallon tank there on the back. Your soap is plumbed to the 16-gallon tank right here on the front. So I'm going to step away. We'll video that manifold right here as we actually are running this, so that you can see a little turbulence in that water. You can't see a whole overabundance of it just because of how this is set up, and without us actually having soaked in these. And also, just so that y'all can see, we're going to flip the bypass over, and that actuator is moving. And we're going to crank it back up again, and you'll be able to see a bypass over there under our fancy bypass line holder, the battery over on the side. swap over and use a much lower pressure side of this. Set my bypass remote down. At this point I am going to be running the internal bypass from this point on. And this is going to be for whatever you do soft wash wise, that way you're not contaminating. It's very, very important before you turn this mixer on that bypass is turned off. If not, we're pumping bleach back into your water tank, wherever that bypass is hooked up to. So right here, we're going to concentrate on the low pressure side. We're going to show it spraying and show what you got going on there. About this is, you want less volume than that, you idle this motor down. Bring it up, it doesn't get a whole lot of volume in there. So when you are running the external bypass portion, that is when you can obviously let this thing run as long as you want to. When it's in this internal bypass, you do want to limit the runtime and or turn the machine on and off. You see, it's very easy to do. Earlier this afternoon, just playing around with distance and stuff like that. There's a building over there across the street. I was controlling it from behind that building. You've got some range with this. Got a reasonably durable remote here. So it is some options, and everything it is set up to where it can be easily serviced within this. We can answer questions about what needs to be done as far as any remote issues, stuff like that. This particular unit actually uses 4 separate remote modules. That way, if something goes down, not everything goes out. This motor does still utilize the key. That way, you have a fail-safe if you need to turn it off. If something happens with your remote battery, it goes dead, something like that, you still have a secondary way to turn it off. So once again, I'm going to go back over all the controls on this thing. The number 2 activates the motor. The number 1 turns it off. So number 3 is going to crank it. Now it's going to try to crank even though I have absolutely nothing there that it can do because all the electronics on the motor are turned off. Number 5 and number 6. Number 6 turns your chemical on. Number 5 turns your chemical off. In the secondary remote, that's what controls the bypass. When you turn this on, you're turning the external bypass on. When you turn it off, you're turning the external bypass off. Now, we do put a pressure gauge on these. That is not something you have to leave in place, but it is something, at least on the front side, we do recommend. The reason we want that there is so you can kind of become comfortable with what you're doing tip size wise. Changing tips, changing the size of your tips, things like that, those are going to be your easiest ways to do things. Between that and the throttle, you can make this thing very versatile, as you saw just a minute ago with what we did soft wash wise in the parking lot. I mean, you're down to the level of a 12-volt pump right there. So if you have any questions, you guys want to take a look at any of these things, give us a call, 770-532-4442.